Today for bait, we're using salt.
Lobsters are widely fished around the world for their meat. One, they are often hard to catch in large numbers, but their large size can make them a profitable catch. One, although the majority of the targeted species are tropical, the majority of the global catch is in temperate waters. Several methods are used to catch lobsters, with the method depending largely on the species being targeted. A lobster pot. The large Homarus lobsters are caught almost exclusively with lobster pots. These are large rigid objects which the lobster enters voluntarily, often to reach bait, and which it then cannot escape. Traps are also used in some spiny lobster fisheries, such as the fishery for the California spiny lobster, Panulirus interruptus, in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Lobster traps can either be wire or wooden. Today fishermen are straying from the wooden traps as they can be heavier than the wire. Traditionally, a lobster trap has two compartments. The outside, or kitchen, has nylon netting leading inside the trap to the parlor where the lobsters are caught. Trawling. Trawling is the main method used for the Norway lobster or Dublin Bay prawn, Nephrops norvegicus, and for those slipper lobsters that prefer soft substrates, such as Thenus and Ibicus. 6. It has also become more frequently used in the fishery for Homarus americanus. Gill nets and trammel nets. Gill nets and trammel nets are used for the Caribbean spiny lobster, Panulirus argus. Legal restrictions apply to the catching of lobsters in many parts of the world, in order to prevent overfishing and allow recruitment to the next generation. Common restrictions include the provision of a minimum landing size, preventing fishermen from catching buried females carrying eggs, closed seasons, and limiting catches with individual fishing quotas. Commercial fishing regulators in the United States, such as the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the National Marine Fisheries Service, enforce restrictions through the use of lobster fishing licenses and lobster pot tags that correspond to the fisher's permit number. Tag manufacturers also maintain databases for each state's licensed fisheries, tracking how many tags each fisher purchases every year. It's a common sight in the fishing communities of Maine each winter to see a stack of wire traps, usually yellow or green, neatly clustered together in someone's side yard for the off-season. But, have you ever looked at one up close? A lobster trap or lobster pot is a portable trap that traps lobsters or crayfish and is used in lobster fishing. In Scotland, chiefly in the north, the word creel was used to refer to a device used to catch lobsters and other crustaceans. A lobster trap can hold several lobsters. Lobster traps can be constructed of wire and wood, metal and netting, or rigid plastic. An opening permits the lobster to enter a tunnel of netting or other one-way device. Pots are sometimes constructed in two parts, called the chamber, or kitchen, where there is bait, and exits into the parlor, which prevents escape. Lobster pots are usually dropped to the seafloor, one or more at a time, sometimes up to 40 or more, and are marked by a buoy so they can be picked up later. The trap can consist of a wood frame surrounded by mesh. The majority of the newer traps found in the northeast of the US and the Canadian Maritimes consist of a plastic-coated metal frame. A piece of bait, often fish or chum, is placed inside the trap, and the traps are dropped onto the seafloor. A long rope is attached to each trap, at the end of which is a plastic or styrofoam buoy that bears the owner's license number. The entrances to the traps are designed to be one-way entrances only. The traps are checked every other day by the fishermen and rebaited if necessary. One study indicated that lobster traps are very inefficient and allow almost all lobsters to escape. 1. Automatic rebaiting improves efficiency. The lobster trap was invented in 1808 by Ebenezer Thorndike of Swampscott, Massachusetts. By 1810, the wooden lath trap is said to have originated in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. New England fishermen in the United States used it for years before American companies introduced it to the Canadian fishery through their Atlantic coast canneries. The framework at the bottom consists of 3 strips of wood, either hemlock, spruce, or pine, the first mentioned being the most durable, a little longer than the width of the pot, about 2 3/4 inches wide, and 1 inch thick. In the ends of each of the outer strips, a hole is bored to receive the ends of a small branch of pliable wood, which is bent into a regular semicircular curve. These hoops are made of branches of spruce or hemlock, or of hardwood saplings, such as maple, birch, or ash, generally retaining the bark. Three of these similar frames, straight below and curved above, constitute the framework of each pot, one to stand at each end and one in the center. The narrow strips of wood, in general, ordinary house laths of spruce or pine, which form the covering, are nailed lengthwise to them, with interspaces between about equal to the width of the lathe. On the bottom, the laths are sometimes nailed on the outside and sometimes on the inside of the cross pieces. The door is formed by 3 or 4 of the laths running the entire length near the top. The door is hinged on using small leather strips and is fastened by a single wooden button in the center, or by 2 buttons, one at each end. The openings into the pot are 2 in number, 1 at each end, are generally knit of coarse twine, and have a mesh between 3/4 of an inch and 1 inch square. They are funnel-shaped, with one side shorter than the other, and at the larger end have the same diameter as the framework. The smaller inner end measures about 6 inches in diameter and is held open using a wire ring or wooden hoop. The funnels are fastened by the larger ends to the end frames of the pot, with the shorter side uppermost, so that when they are in place they lead obliquely upward into the pot instead of horizontally. The inner ends are secured in position by 1 or 2 cords extending to the center frame. The funnels are about 11 or 12 inches deep and therefore extend about halfway to the center of the pot. They taper rapidly and form a strongly inclined plane, up which the lobsters must climb in their search for the bait. A 2-strand manila twine is most commonly used for the funnels. Cotton is also used, but is more expensive and less durable. It's a common sight in the fishing communities of Maine each winter to see a stack of wire traps, usually yellow or green, neatly clustered together in someone's side yard for the off-season. But, have you ever looked at one up close? In Maine, the device for catching a lobster is more commonly called a trap, and regionally sometimes referred to as a pot. In the mid-1600s, anyone could catch a lobster inshore with a hoop net and a dory. Later, wooden rounded traps replaced that method, becoming the forerunner of the modern plastic-coated metal frame design. Weighted down by about 4 bricks, the trap sits on the ocean floor and is secured at the surface, strung up by a buoy.
Nice. Keeper female? No eggs.
The buoy's unique painted color scheme distinguishes that trap, or gang of traps, from everyone else's. The genius of a lobster trap is that it is built to be an enticing little temporary home for lobsters, which tend to crawl along the ocean floor anywhere from 20 to 500 feet in depth. Thus, it makes sense that the various areas of the trap are labeled after the rooms in a house. First, they enter through the 7-inch funnel of netting called the side head, or entry head, which gets them into the trap's first compartment, the kitchen. Like a freeloader at an open house, a lobster just looking to score some free wine and appetizers then nibbles on the bait bag, usually stuffed with salted fish such as herring, and attempts to exit the kitchen through a second cone of netting into the middle of the trap known as the mid-parlor. Each compartment of the trap gets smaller and harder to get through like a fun house, when they crawl through the cone like netting to the third chamber called the parlor. There's an iconic lyric in the Eagles song, Hotel California. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. That should be the Lobsters theme song. It's easy for the larger lobster to crawl into the trap, but the funnel shape of each head and its tunneled netting into smaller compartments makes it much more difficult for them to crawl out, although quite a few manage to escape. However, the forefathers of the lobster industry were conservationists before that term had ever caught on in the 20th century. To borrow another lyric, just slip out the back, Jack, from Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, the modern lobster trap has to be equipped with at least one escape vent, which looks like a mail slot, measuring 2 by 6 inches for small marine life and lobsters smaller than 3 3/8 inch carapace length that can't legally be caught anyway.
Now here, a bigger female, no notch, no eggs. See how she measures. Keep her. Last but not least.
So, if a small lobster crawls all the way through to the parlor, the escape vents allow him to swim away and live to grow bigger and procreate. In the last 25 years, the design of the trap has improved with small tweaks. Ghost traps, traps cut off at the surface and laying unattended on the ocean floor, are a big problem every year, so lobstermen also designed another conservation device of equipping each escape hatch with biodegradable steel rings that would disintegrate in 6 to 12 months. So, if any large lobsters are still caught in a ghost trap, they can eat all the other stuff that comes into the trap until they eventually escape. For more than 200 years, the design of this trap was deliberately envisioned by lobstermen who didn't want to overexploit this natural resource, so they could leave a healthy industry for future generations. No other fishing industry has been as self-regulated and as visionary as Maine lobstering, and today, when so many other resources are depleted, the Maine lobster industry has become a model of sustainable seafood, continuing to thrive even though years of heavy fishing. A lobsterman can be a man or a woman, or a boy or a girl. You have to get a special fishing license just for lobsters. Some people catch lobsters for fun, but many men and women catch and sell lobsters as their job. You need to learn how from another person that catches lobsters, and you have to have that special license. While the American lobster can be found as far south as Virginia and the Carolinas, the most viable commercial fishery really start in the Massachusetts, Rhode Island areas and ranges all the way up to Newfoundland, Canada. The majority of fishing for lobsters is still done in much the same way as when the fishery first started, with a bit of modern technology to make things easier. About 80 to 90% of landings are from the inshore fishery, and lobsters are fished with baited traps or pots. The number of traps a lobsterman is allowed to fish at any one time may vary depending on the regulations where she is fishing. However, the technique is basically the same. A lobsterman will put a bag full of bait, usually herring or other fish, in each trap dropped from the boat, or set. It is attached by a rope, trap line, to a floating buoy to mark its location. Buoys are painted with particular colors that are registered by each lobsterman, which helps identify to whom each trap belongs. Each trap is allowed to soak or stay in the water for usually 2 or 3 days. Then the Lobster boat returns to haul up each trap. The lobsterman will pull the boat up beside the trap and snag the buoy with a gaff, a special hook designed for that purpose. The trap line will then be brought onto the boat and connected to a hydraulic trap hauler, an automated pulley-like system that reels the trap up from the bottom to the side of the boat. Once on the boat, the lobsterman and/or the sternman will remove the lobsters from the trap. Those of legal size will be kept, and those that are too small or too big, and those that are V-notched, will be returned to the water. A new bait bag is put in the trap and it is the reset for the next haul. A lobsterman can be a man or a woman, or a boy or a girl. You have to get a special fishing license just for lobsters. Some people catch lobsters for fun, but many men and women catch and sell lobsters as their job. You need to learn how from another person that catches lobsters, and you have to have that special license. Lobsters are caught in lobster traps, also called lobster pots. A lobsterman will put a bag full of bait, usually herring or other fish, in each trap.
Put all these together.
He or she will then go out in the ocean in their lobster boat and drop their traps into the water, and hope that the lobster will go into the trap because they want to eat the bait. Once a lobster is in the trap, it is hard for it to get out. After a day or two, the lobsterman will pull up the traps they dropped into the water and hope to see lobsters inside. Sometimes lobsters have to be put back in the ocean. Most of the time, lobstermen will put mother lobsters back into the ocean with a special notch in the shape of a V cut into a tail fin. Also, the smaller, younger lobsters, in Maine, those less than 3 1/4 carapace length, are put back. Sometimes they put the very big lobster back too, in Maine over 5 carapace length. They do this to be sure there will always be enough lobsters in the ocean and enough for fishermen to catch and people to eat. This is called conservation. Males have larger claws than females of the same size. Mating occurs after the female molts. Lobsters display a complex courtship, mating ritual, in which the female picks a male to mate with and approaches his cave-like shelter, where she produces a pheromone and wafts it in his direction. The male and female then engage in a boxing ritual, and the female enters the male's den, where she eventually molts and they mate before the female's new shell hardens. For detailed descriptions of a lobster's mating ritual, see the Lobster Conservancy or the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. The female carries 7,000 to 80,000 eggs under her abdomen for 9 to 11 months before larvae are hatched. The larvae have 3 planktonic stages during which they are found at the water's surface, and then they settle to the bottom where they remain for the rest of their lives. Lobsters reach adulthood after 5 to 8 years, but it takes about 6 to 7 years for a lobster to reach the edible size of 1 pound. It is thought that American lobsters can live for 50 to 100 years or more. The American lobster is found in the North Atlantic Ocean from Labrador, Canada, to North Carolina. Lobsters can be found both in coastal areas and offshore along the continental shelf. Some lobsters may migrate from offshore areas during the winter and spring to inshore areas during the summer and fall, while others are longshore migrants traveling up and down the coast. According to the University of New Hampshire, one of these migrants traveled 398 nautical miles, 458 miles, over 3.5 years. Some accounts say that early New Englanders did not want to eat lobsters, even though the waters were so rich in lobsters that they were literally crawling out of the sea and piling up inhospitably on the beaches. It was said that lobsters were considered a food fit only for poor. Evidently, New Englanders eventually developed a taste for it. In addition to harvesting, lobsters are threatened by pollutants in the water, which can accumulate in their tissues. Lobsters in highly populated coastal areas are also prone to shell rot or shell burn disease, which results in dark holes burned into the shell. Coastal areas are important nursery areas for young lobsters, and young lobsters could be affected as the coast is developed more heavily and population, pollution, and sewage runoff increases. The lobster's biggest predator is humans, who have seen lobster as a luxury food item for years. Lobstering has increased greatly over the last 50 years, according to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. Dungeness crab live in seafloor areas with sandy and muddy bottoms or in eelgrass beds, according to California Sea Grant. They live from the intertidal zone to depths of 750 feet but are most abundant at depths above 295 feet. They can live for up to 13 years, but males are often caught at around 4 years old. Mature Dungeness crab molt once a year, typically in summer months, while younger crabs in the first 2 years of their life can molt as many as 7 times a year. Dungeness crab have a diverse diet and will eat just about anything they can get their claws on, according to California Sea Grant. This includes bivalves and other crustaceans, for which they use their strong claws to chip away and break the shells of other creatures until the flesh can be pulled to their mouths. They have small oral appendages to help pull food from their claws to their mouth. Dungies are prey to seals, sea lions, sea otters, octopuses, some species of fish, and, of course, humans. Dungeness crab fisheries are managed by state agencies throughout the West Coast, with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife overseeing the fishery here in California. As noted above, Dungeness crab must have a 6.25-inch shell diameter to be kept aboard fishing vessels, and they must also be male without soft shells, meaning a recent molt. Small crab, females, and softies are sorted on deck and dropped down to the bottom to resume their undersea lives. A changing climate drove a spike in whale entanglements during the extreme marine heat wave in the North Pacific from 2014-2016, aka the blob, but commercial crab fishermen have been proactive in finding solutions to mitigate any future entanglements through the California Dungeness Crab Fishing Gear Working Group. Monterey Bay fishermen are committed to a whale-safe fishery. Dungeness crab harvested from the Monterey Bay, and throughout the West Coast, are still rated good alternative by the Monterey Bay Aquarium's Seafood Watch. You can buy Dungeness crab directly from local fishermen off the dock, at local restaurants, grocery stores, and fish markets. Check out our local catch page for more information, or check out our recipes page for tips on how to store, prepare, and cook Dungeness crab and other seafood. Dungeness crab season typically runs from November through June off the Sonoma County coast, but winter is always the time locals go wild for crustaceans and get downright crabby. Crab festivals pop up, families go crabbing off the end of piers, and others book space on a crabbing party boat out of Bodega Bay. Together, we can protect and preserve the beauty and natural resources of Sonoma County for generations to come. Check out our page on sustainable travel, and look over the Leave No Trace 7 principles. If crabbing from a public pier, you don't need a sport fishing license to set a trap or net. Read all about it in the state's ocean sport fishing regulations, pages 51 to 52. You can keep up to 10 Dungeness crabs per day during the season, but they must measure a minimum of 5 to 3/4 of an inch across the shell. The best time to catch is early in the morning or an hour or so before sunset. A popular on-shore crabbing spot, the Breakwater Jetty off Doran Regional Park. Another good place to try, the Marina Jetty at Bodega Bay's Spud Point Marina, on the marina's south end. Go enjoy some freshly caught crab. A person pulls freshly cooked crab out of a pot to serve Spud Point Crab Company. Head to the Bodega Bay Marina, where you can buy it straight off the dock. You'll have to rise early to meet the fisherman, or enjoy a variety of crab delicacies Sonoma County style at these restaurants. Or check out our article about the top seafood restaurants in Bodega Bay. Check out unique parks for fishing in Sonoma County, river beaches and fishing spots in Sonoma County, and whale watching along the Sonoma coast.
The floor is alive.
We're gonna make a big, beautiful nest is what we're trying to do here.
You guys are so mean to each other.